Welcome back, everybody. This is the Casual GM podcast. I am your host, Drew, and I am, of course, joined by my co-host, Mike. Mike, how are you?
Just as handsome as ever, Drew. Yourself?
That joke has never gotten old. I'm so
glad. It isn't, and it won't.
That's true. Well, with the lack of Lions games to discuss at this time of year, since we're going to the Super Bowl this Sunday, right? I think it's this Sunday, isn't it?
Next Sunday. This is kind of the off week.
Oh, they get a week of rest, right?
Yeah, is that when they're doing the Pro Bowl and the flag football challenge?
I think so. Whatever it is, I want to call it NFL recess at this point.
Yeah, sponsored recess.
It's
most importantly.
I never thought much of the Pro Bowl prior to these changes. I think even less of it now. Like it's just, it's an accolade. Okay, talk to me when you're an All-Pro. Sorry, I'm finishing up a conversation on Facebook. Yeah. But yeah, we've got some Pro Bowl alternates who are making their way to Honolulu. I believe it's still in Honolulu, isn't it?
I believe it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have Jared Goff, Penny Sewell, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, who have all been named Pro Bowl alternates, and I'm happy for them because I've been to Hawaii, and it is nothing short of paradise.
I bet
it is perfect. It is perfect there. It is just gorgeous and perfect and great.
And Sewell gets to go back and visit family.
Yeah, and I mean, I imagine it's a different experience if you grow up there. Like if you come to, Manti Te'o, who was a very, very good linebacker, grew up in Hawaii, I believe, and then went to college he was going to go to USC, and then he ended up going to Notre Dame. I have to imagine that when you grow up in Hawaii and then you come to the States, it's like entering in like a gray, dull, two-dimensional world that
everything's a disappointment.
Everything sucks. I mean, I don't understand how anything else could be compared to the States if you grew up in paradise. But so they get to go. Like Sewell's going home or whatever. So that's nice. I hope they have a good time. I just don't want to make more of the Pro Bowl than I think that it's deserves. Yeah. And so it's a nice accolade, but Tyler Huntley is also going to the Pro Bowl for the AFC. He's the 6th quarterback.
Yeah. And I see Derek Carr is the one that was replacing Joe Burrow, the person that couldn't even finish the season on his team.
Yeah. So I mean,
grain of salt, guys.
Yeah, grain of salt. So I mean, I'm sure it's fun. So and I mean, it still matters in the sense that players have escalators in their contract based upon how many if they make Pro Bowls. If you are a first contract player, especially a first contract player, and you make a Pro Bowl, your 5th-year option increases. If you make a second Pro Bowl, it maxes out, or if you make an All-Pro team, it maxes out. So it is still relevant for some things, but not with me.
Yeah. Well, there's some other news and notes around the NFL too, right? Welcome, Zeka. We've got a head coaching trade.
We haven't seen many of these. I think the last one that was traded for was John Gruden.
Was it? Yeah, that sounds about right.
When he went from,
Tampa Bay, right, to LA?
Was that the direction it went? It wasn't from LA to Tampa Bay.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't LA at the time; it was Oakland. But
you can't keep track of where the Raiders have played. They're all over the Southwest.
They're as bad as the Rams.
I know.
They've been all over the place too.
One of the few migratory teams in the NFL.
Yeah.
So the Broncos traded their first-round pick this year. I believe it's number 30.
29.
Is it
29? I just looked at it before we popped on.
Well, that was smart.
Got him. Usually you're on the ball. So whenever I can pop in there with something, I feel good.
Yeah, I'm thinking of San Francisco's pick. No, it's 30.
Well, then the article I read are liars.
Yeah, probably. So I'm on Tankathon, which is
state of journalism today. Good Lord.
I know it's not very good, but like, so I show that this pick belonged to Denver from the Russell Wilson trade, I believe. No, we'll look it up.
Anyway,
they are picking 30th.
Okay.
So now New Orleans.
Man, I was wrong. Here I do a jump in. Yeah, you're wrong. I'm right. And then you're like, no, I'm right.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Sad face.
New Orleans now has a first round pick in this year's class. Their pick belongs to Philadelphia, which is 10th. And now they get Denver's pick. So good for New Orleans. They also get a 2024 second round pick, but they had to give up their 2024 third round pick, I believe. That goes with Sean Payton to Denver. So Denver, they're swapping their second and third rounders next year. So it all in all, it seems like a fine deal. Also, D'Amico Ryans was hired to be the next head coach of the Houston Texans on a 6-year deal. However, I don't know that anyone can trust the Houston Texans when it comes to hiring coaches and the length of their contracts. So, because they just did their last 2 coaches pretty harshly. So we'll see. I hope he gets the full 6 and that he's super successful and we see some movement in the AFC South. That would be cool.
Yeah.
I've heard, so that leaves the Cardinals and the Colts job still open. And I saw a funny tweet before we came on that said, Jim Harbaugh is the likely lead candidate for both those jobs and will still be coaching at Michigan. So,
so they're highly sought after jobs, eh?
Yeah, apparently he can bend the laws of physics and be in multiple places at the same time. So
I mean, he does have to. He has a game on Saturday, then they can go game on Sunday. No big deal.
Yeah, no big deal, right?
If anybody can do it, Harbaugh can.
In 24 hours time, he can handle that. Let's see. So we were talking about head coaches. So at least the dominoes have started to fall.
Yeah.
As far as the head coaching carousel is concerned. So
as far as they also lost someone, right?
Well, before we get there, because we're going to get there next.
I want to jump ahead.
Aaron Glenn is still in the running for the Arizona job. He interviewed at least once for that position, and now we're getting down to like Sean Payton's off the board, D'Amico Ryans off the board.
I heard he was taking a second interview there too.
Okay. So it's entirely possible that Aaron Glenn may not be back with the Lions, and then they'd be in need of a defensive coordinator. So it would be interesting at that point, if that were to happen, do they go in-house and promote someone like a Kelvin Shepherd, or do you bring in an outside hire that you think fits the team? So,
yeah, kind of curious what Funky and Zeka and anybody else that pops into the chat, what they think about Aaron Glenn potentially leaving for a head coaching gig. Do we care? Are we bummed? Is there somebody else that we want to pull in that situation, or do we want to pull a guy like Kelvin Shepherd? I think he was impressive in the Hard Knocks. So the little bit of curated behind the scenes that we got to see, I was impressed with the way he treated his guys and the way the guys responded. So whether he's ready for it, I don't know. That's more of a Dan Campbell decision, but.
So I have no problem with Aaron Glenn. Like I'm not, but I would say I'm also I'm not such a fan of his that I would want to prevent him from leaving for this opportunity if they offered it to him. Yeah. So there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, there are not enough African-American head coaches in the NFL. So I think that would be good for him to help balance those scales as much as we can. Number two, if that does happen, the Lions get 2 third-round picks as compensatory picks because they're helping promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in the NFL. So I would be a huge fan of getting more draft picks because I love draft picks. And then to replace Aaron Glenn, I'll throw out a name. Let's see what Brian Flores is up to. I don't know if he's already off. No. I don't know if he's already accepted a different position, but I would want a guy like that on our staff.
Has Eric Bieniemy been picked up as a head coach or a coordinator? He was more offensive than defensive, though, right?
I believe he's KC's offensive coordinator.
Okay.
So, like, Jim Irsay in Indianapolis has gone to the point where, like, I can no longer get anywhere close with predicting, like, what he's gonna do. I've heard that Jeff Saturday is the likely candidate to get the Colts head coaching job. That just baffles me.
He came right off the couch and won a game.
Yeah.
One game.
Lost, and then I believe he lost the next 7.
I believe so too.
But like hiring Eric Bieniemy would be, I think, a really good idea. If he's up for leaving Kansas City. Of course, if that would be your front runner, you'd have to probably wait until after the Super Bowl in order to interview, see if it's a fit, and then bring him in. And like for bad teams, which the Colts and the Cardinals are and probably, were and probably are heading into next season, that's just delaying what you can do with your offseason by another couple of weeks, and like other bad, quote unquote, bad teams are already full tilt running, trying to fix their like head coaching, like their coaching staffs, prepping for the Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl, maybe working on draft boards, putting together free agency options, all that good stuff. So, and you can't do all of that as effectively if you don't know like who's in charge and who's supposed to manage all of it. So,
and what the schemes are going to look like.
Yeah. That matters.
Well, and I know, so one of the things that we're going to talk about today is we're going to start taking a look at our offensive line position group, but we had one other news and note around the Lions, and they're, I cannot remember the name, but one of their lead scouts dipped and went somewhere else.
Yeah. And so I saw that when it happened on Twitter, people were like, doesn't matter, he's not Brad Holmes. Okay. Brad Holmes does not do every task when it comes to the draft.
Yeah.
There is a staff of people that prepare things for him or help him do things so that he can arrive at a decision.
Yeah.
And this was one of those guys. So congratulations. He's moving up in as far as the NFL world. Yeah. But that's one less person to fulfill that role that Brad Holmes has had with him for the last 2 classes.
Yep.
So will it matter? Probably not, but you lose good people. That matters. So
I always wonder how those kinds of things work behind the scenes when clearly this person knows everything that we're looking for. The types of players that we want, the qualities that we're looking for, the players that we're scouting, the colleges that we're scouting. And then he goes to take that information somewhere else. Like, I don't know if there's some sort of non-disclosure agreement type of thing, or if he can take that information and, use it in-house at the new gig. I've always been curious how those kinds of things work. I don't know have you heard anything about that, or like
no
what the rules are? I'm assuming it's proprietary information and there's some sort of NDA.
Mm-hmm. Probably. I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, me neither.
Excellent. We're doing excellent.
Yes. Just posing questions with no answers. Maybe if we can get Brad Holmes, not Brad Gnomes.
Gnomes, yeah.
On the show one of these times, we can ask him that question.
Yeah. If we get Brad Holmes on the show, I'm going to be a gibbering mess. So like,
I'll do most of the talking.
That's fine. You're so good at the job I want. So.
So we're gonna talk position groups. Before we do that,
Yeah.
want to welcome a new sub, Frederick Mask. Mask.
How are we
So
spelling
thanks,
that?
Frederick, for joining the crew. That's awesome. We appreciate it. And then the other thing was, and I don't know if we want to get this in the end or the beginning.
Let's just do it now.
Just gonna do it now. All right. You know what time it is?
Game time. What?
It's new hat time.
Oh, that. Okay.
We can do it later. We can do it now.
Let's do it now.
Let's do it now. All right.
Throw it up there real quick.
Let me bring up the form.
It was a landslide, if I recall.
It was a landslide. We ended up with 33 responses, and hat number 1, which was the grit, won 26, crushing the competition at 78.8% of the vote.
Hat 4 had no votes.
Hat 4 had no votes, and for review, where's that? Come on, let's go back.
Did someone say something?
Hat 4.
Hat 4 is the black on black. I don't know why no one liked that one. I like that one.
Hat 3 was the second place. I think I'm going to buy that hat 3. Okay. Not because it was the second place, but that was my favorite.
Okay.
And we both can't wear grit, so
sure.
So Drew's going to be in a grit hat, and I'm going to track this one down in that gray one.
A6 is like, I might have to buy one of those for myself. Well, make sure to pick the one that Mike gets. So,
well, he can go with hat number 2 because you've got 1, I've got 3. A6, go grab number 2.
Yeah. So hat 1 is the clear winner. I'll be purchasing that here in the next week or so, and we'll you'll see it on the podcast at some point here in the near future. Frederick, Fredrik. That's interesting. I haven't seen that spelling before.
Offensive line, when we start hitting the position group.
So this is we're getting real close to our series on just going through and reviewing the position groups for the Lions 2022 roster. Heading into free agency, wrapping up. I think we only have quarterback next, right? Is last next week.
Yep.
Okay. So,
and boy, do I have some stats on that.
Yeah, you've been prepping pretty hard. Tackles. Lions are great on their starting tackles. They have Taylor Decker under contract for the next, I think, 2 seasons. Penny Sewell's, of course, heading into his 3rd season on the roster. And so at the end, this time next year, there will be a conversation as, what should we pick up Penny Sewell's 5th-year option? Let me save everybody the heartbreak and the chewed fingernails and that kind of stuff. And they're going to do that. They're going to pick up his option. So the only thing I'm hoping for, and this will sound weird, is that he doesn't get voted into the Pro Bowl next season as the people he gets voted in right away. None of this alternate crap that we already talked about. But if he gets voted in, his 5th-year option will go up in price. It'll hit an escalator. So I love Penny Sewell. I want him to have all the success in the world. No, I don't, Mike.
All right.
But I just don't want him to make his first Pro Bowl after next season. So that if the Lions do pick up that 5th-year option, which seems incredibly likely, that they just save, $3-4 million bucks, basically.
I mean, that's a running back,
right?
It's a decent running back, even.
Yeah, it's a couple of guys on the bottom of your roster. It's making practice squad moves in season, and he's not going anywhere. Like they're going to max out his rookie deal, and then they're going to give him a top of the market deal when he's going into his 2nd contract. So that's not a problem. So those 2 guys, rock solid. Okay. Someone had posed a question last week in the chat that said, what do you think about all the chatter about trading Decker? So I want to address that just real quickly. before we do the rest of the offensive line. So Taylor Decker gets a pay bump this upcoming season. We paid him $14.4 million. That was his cap hit for the 2022 season, and he goes up to 19.3 this coming year. And then he has one more season, the 2024 season, at 19 million, and then 2025 is a void year. So effectively, his contract is up at the end of 2024. So here's what I think. There's no reason to trade Taylor Decker now. He's solid. He's allowing a lot of things to happen. I think on the offensive side, like the running game is benefits from his presence. I think Penei Sewell benefits from his presence, and he's affordable. Like $19 million a season is not that bad for
it's 74 grade, 74.4.
Yeah, and right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. He is the 15th highest paid left tackle in football. So right in the middle of, all the left tackles, that qualify in the NFL. So I think we're paying what we should for him, and he's a decent player. Like, is he a top line left tackle? No. Is he above average? Yeah, he is. And so I'm happy at what we're paying him for what he's been producing. So you keep that guy. It might get different this time next year. So if you're the Lions and you're heading into the draft, I just wonder where the team will be, because I think that's going to be the ultimate determination as what we want to do moving forward. So if they want to switch Sewell to the left side, they could explore moving Decker. And I mean in a trade, not cutting him, because he should fetch some kind of draft compensation for how well he has played. And his contract will be even more palatable this time next year than it is this year. But I don't see them. I think that's a long shot, and like, when his contract is up after the 2024 season, I think that they probably would let him leave in free agency, move Sewell, and then probably draft a replacement at right tackle, would be my guess. That's 2 years away. There's no reason to do that. But their contracts align. Like, one ends, the next one starts. So I don't know. I see a lot of like flow there, or like whatever, like, oh, looks like it could have been a plan, like, who knows. Now
he's currently the 24th highest graded tackle, right and left, like overall tackle.
Yeah, so that's solid. I think that's good. Like, there's no reason to mess with that formula, right? The interior of the line, now there's some more questions, right? Frank Ragnow, good center, top 5 center in the NFL. No problems with him. He's been dealing with soft tissue injuries each of the last 2 seasons. That is a little bit more concerning than whatever, but he played through them this year and played pretty well. He is also getting a huge bump in pay. He's getting a $9 million a year increase. So now that's also pretty much the last time that they're going to pay him something like that. So his contract does something a little bit different than I've seen. When his extension starts, it kind of like bounces up and down like the stock market or like a heart monitor. So in 2023, he's going to make $16.4 million. In 24, it goes down to 12.8. Then it goes to 14. Then it goes to 16. So I think his contract really is, he's on the roster through the 2024 season. And then you get to the point where it's like 2025, he'll be 29 years old, 2026, that's when he hits 30. You could look to see, have these injuries taken a toll on him. I was just looking at that. So he is pretty crazy. Ragnow is. So this is
Broken throat.
a broken
Legit,
throat.
right?
You wouldn't think that that's a thing.
Yeah.
Let's just take it real quick. So he is the second highest paid center in the NFL behind Jason Kelce, and they rank these by average per year. But like Jason Kelce's contract is a 1-year deal, and he is likely to retire. So it seems like that Frank Ragnow will be the highest paid center in the NFL until Creed Humphrey with the Chiefs gets his contract extension in 2 more years. So we pay him like he's the best center in the league, and he's right there. So I mean, like, I don't think that, and that could easily be, number one next year. I mean, we just don't know, right? His health could be better. There could be more continuity on the line. He might just even play better. Who knows? So he's a rock, right? So you have 3 rocks out of 5. They're all set. Your guards are, I think, where there's a conversation. So the one guard that we've been talking about all year is Vaitai. What do you do with Vaitai? How do you say his first name again, Mike?
I don't. It's like, no, I'm not even going to try. I hate you.
Yeah, I know. So, what do you do with Vaitai? Well, that's an ad.
Yeah, Vaitai. You talk. I find.
So, if you cut him before June 1st, you'll take a $5.8 million dead cap hit. You'll save 6.5 on the books. If you designate him a post June 1 cut, I think you end up saving the $9.5 million. So how is his back? That's the question that the Lions have to have answered. Because if he can't go and it's his back, then I think that you post June 1 him, and you, like right now, and you save yourself 9.5 on the cap, and you start looking for a replacement. Maybe in free agency, probably in the draft.
So Funky brings up a good question.
Yeah.
How about, since the Lions need a right guard, speaking of right guards, why not draft a tackle this year so you can move Decker next year and have your guy ready to go in-house? Kind of the opposite of what we did with Vaitai, right? Because we brought him in as a tackle, moved him to a guard.
Right.
And so we're going to draft the tackle, but keep him at the guard and move him to tackle.
Right. So and they may very well do that. I do think that interior and basically backup offensive line, any spot in this class is something they should look to invest in, probably outside of the top 100. But I could certainly see them using one of their first 5 picks on a player, even if it is on a primarily backup role, maybe at guard. Like in one of our recent mock drafts for the show, we picked Osiris Torrance at 18 for the Lions, right? Like, largely thinking Vaitai will not return, and that would be an immediate plug and play rookie next to Penei Sewell. So the question is, how is Vaitai's back? If it's a no-go, post June 1 him, maybe bring him into the organization if he decides to retire. Okay, but what about Jonah Jackson? He's super good on the left side. So Jonah Jackson's contract is up, I believe, after this upcoming season. And he has made a Pro Bowl. I mean, I believe he was an alternate, like most of the guys that we have going to the Pro Bowl this season. And there it is. And we are paying him basically nothing, like $3.2 million. Do you re-sign this guy? He seems to be quite capable. Made the Pro Bowl.
I would keep
solid.
him.
Well, I mean, like, so this is the other thing. Like, if the Lions are going to do that, I mean, who in the future are you not re-signing? Because
Swift.
Well, sure, but like, here's my thing: is like, he was drafted in the 3rd round out of Ohio State. and because he's a Pro Bowler, I would be looking for a pretty hefty contract. I mean, not necessarily top of the guard market, because Quentin Nelson obliterated the top of the guard market with his extension, but like something that's like, I mean, I think he could ask for between 12 and 15 a year.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd sign him for that.
Right.
I'd try to get a hometown, look at what we're building. Do you want to be part of it? Discount, right?
Sure.
And if you'll sign for 8, I'd probably do it. I'm not sure he would, but I think I'd probably pay 8 for him.
Yeah, that would be great. But like, I think that, so Evan Brown, who was our backup center, who played well last season, when Ragnow went down and had to miss like 12 games or whatever it was, he's also a free agent. And I think that someone's going to give him starter money to be on their team. And so I think that we're losing our primary backup, and he was the main replacement when Ragnow couldn't go for a couple games.
Yeah.
He filled in at guard most of the season for Vaitai. So not only are you losing,
here's our duct tape,
right? Basically, right. Like your glue guy. So like, not only did you lose your right guard, but we don't know if he's going to be healthy enough to come back, and you're losing your primary backup at center and right guard, which are the positions that have the most missed time on the roster this year at the on the offensive line. And then next year, your Pro Bowl left, third round pick from a couple of years ago, his deal is going to be up. So to me, the answer to this question is, I don't think that I would re-sign Evan Brown. Like, I think that someone's going to give him around $10 million a year. That was my guess, to be a starter coming out of this season. 2 years in a row playing at a starter level. I think he's probably going to get some money, especially because there's not going to be a ton of high-priced free agents entering, the offseason this season. Yeah. Okay. So like
entering the offseason.
You're entering the offseason. That's a much better way to say it. So I think what the Lions are losing depth, because Dan Skipper, Matt Nelson, Evan Brown, they are all going to be free agents heading into the season. Now, you might re-sign a Skipper or a Matt Nelson, and then Tommy Kramer, who was hurt most of the year, was supposed to be the replacement for Vaitai heading into like OTAs and the preseason. He got hurt. He didn't play all year, I don't think, or very limited snaps. I don't know what his situation is. Yeah. So like, interior starter, you need one interior starter, and you need like 2 interior backups, and it would be nice to get a backup tackle. So that's like 3 or 4 spots. So I wouldn't be surprised if they re-signed. My guess would be Dan Skipper.
He just did not play well.
He did not.
So I mean, almost anybody else we could find will probably be more performant, more effective, I guess, than Skipper.
So as we know, and we're going to discuss later, because we're going to touch on our positions of value again, finding a guard in free agency is not difficult, because they're available in free agency. Like, you don't have quarterbacks in their prime hitting the open market after their rookie deals, right? Like, you get tagged, you get extended. Like, you just don't ever make it for a team to have a bidding war for your services.
That's
guards do
contract-ish or tear down, rebuild. I mean, when you look at the big changes that have happened, Stafford, he was in here 12 years. He was on 3 contracts. We're going to do a rebuild. He didn't want it. Tom Brady was 20-ish years into his career. It's certainly not one of his first couple of contracts. Those were kind of the bigger ones recently. But even with David Carr, I mean, he's not on a rookie deal. I mean, he's been around for 10 years-ish. So, yeah, you're not getting those
They don't make it.
Herbert and Mahomes and Allen and even guys like Kyler Murray that he just signed a big deal. You just don't get those guys. Lamar Jackson, that'll be interesting. I'll be curious to see how that goes.
We're going to talk about Lamar here in a little while too. So here's my, like, I took a look at like I think it's Spot Tracks, like predictive free agent market for guards. And there's a couple of guys that I think that you could sign, but I think that if you're going to sign those guys, you might as well just try and re-sign Evan Brown. You know? But like, so to me, what I've been doing a lot of in like the mocks that I just do for fun is my top 100 is something like defense, maybe a tight end, maybe a quarterback, who knows, maybe a wide receiver. And then when we get to the 3 picks, you know, starting in the 5th round, I usually go something like guard, tackle, just for depth, just to have those guys on the board. Does somebody work out? Like, we're talking about 4 solid starters on the offensive line. If Vaitai can't go, you can plug a rookie 5th round guard into that starting group and just run with it.
Yeah. And one price says, I'd like to keep Jonah, but guards are a dime a dozen. Well, right on the, you know, nail on the head right there.
Bullseye, right? One Pride gets it. So to quickly recap, check in on Vaitai, check in on Tommy Kramer, don't re-sign Evan Brown, and draft replacements, you know, and it's probably going to be, I mean, that would be 3 guys, but you might even be a guy short if you're doing what I'm trying to do through the draft. So, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they sign a guy in free agency and picked up 1 or 2 backup offensive linemen in the later rounds of this class. So it's going to be interesting. I think the starters are fine, right? Like, if starters don't get hurt, and they were largely healthy this year, starters don't get hurt, you're going to have a good line. Like, PFF, I believe, had the Lions line rated 8th overall. Great. That's fantastic. So I don't have any issue with that. But, like, you also have to be cognizant of the fact that you're not going to have to, you can't put, you know, if you re-sign Jonah Jackson, then you'll have Ragnow, Jackson, and Sewell all on either an extension or a second contract in the next 2 years. And then you need to move on from Taylor Decker, because you can't have your offensive line cost $65 million, you know, or what have you. Like, you're eventually going to eat into your ability to make the overall roster improve.
Yeah.
So those are my thoughts on the O-line.
The new cap number just came out, right?
So the new cap number came out. So it's going to be $224.8 million, which it was predicted that it would be 225. So, you know, bullseye. So the Lions are going to have, I think I saw $18 million in cap room before cuts and anything. And, like, Brockers is almost guaranteed to get cut. So that's another $10 million. And then I think you're talking about, like, what do you do with Charles Harris? What do you do with Vaitai? Is Romeo Okwara, you know, post June 1 or whatever? So we'll just have to see. This roster currently that we're looking at here on overthecap.com. This is 47 players. Remember, they're going to sign another 43 players between now and, you know, spring training or OTAs. So they're going to double the size of the roster from what it is today, you know, in the next 4 or 5 months. So
we'll save 10 mil on Brockers.
Yep.
Potentially, depending on if we do pre or post, could be $9.5 million on Vaitai, depending on how that goes.
Yep.
We could save another $4 million on Harris, right? So there's almost $25 million that we could save.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see too many other obvious cuts with big savings. Most of the other guys are kind of depth guys. Maybe Cephas, right? If he's just not going to be part of the plan, if he's going to be our sixth wide receiver, I'd rather cut him, save the $1 million, and potentially fill him with a draft spot. But we can very easily, and that's not even including the idea of, well, and I know he just made the Pro Bowl,
Right.
but saving $21 million if we were to go quarterback in the draft. I mean, we could free up almost $60 million.
So yeah, so like, and that sounds like a great number to get to, $60 million. Neat. But there needs to be somebody that you're planning that money for, whether it's to sign them and bring them in, free agency, or extend. So like what I am guessing the Lions will do in the offseason, what I would hope they do is guys like Brock Wright, Chris Board, Deshaun Elliott, Anthony Pittman, John Kaminsky, Isaiah Buggs, sign all those guys to like 3-year, $9 million total contracts. So like basically $3 million a year for all of them. It'd be a significant upgrade for all of them. Even front load the money, and then you could have like 8 guys that are basically all getting like a nice little bump in pay and get a roster spot, and then your cap's going to look nice leading right up to when you need to make all of these, like Amon-Ra St. Brown's going to get a contract extension. Penei Sewell's going to get a contract extension in the same year, So like you're probably going to look at like I wouldn't be surprised if like Penei Sewell got something like 24 a year. And I wouldn't be surprised if Amon-Ra St. Brown, even though he was a 4th round pick, gets something like the same. I know it sounds crazy.
I estimated higher for St. Brown. Like you and I were talking, I don't know if it was last week or if it was off cam, but I think he's going to be closer to the 28 and 30 mark with the way that the wide receiver monies are going.
If he goes something like 90 catches plus 1,000 yards and like 5 or 6 touchdowns 4 years in a row, I mean, like he's the best version of that player in the NFL, right?
Yep.
I mean, I don't know who else really compares. Like the thing, Senior Bowl prospects. Okay. I know. Oh, so here's one thing I did want to say. Don't distract me, One Pride, you little sneaky. So one of the guys that I was looking at for the Lions in the upcoming draft, like in the mid rounds, was a guy named, oh man, I think his name is Travius Hodgkins Thompson. I might be wrong about that, but he is a cornerback for TCU. I watched him in the college football playoff, and I thought, man, that guy is playing tough. Like that seems like a Lions player, like the kind of guy like he and Jerry Jacobs.
He'll bite your kneecap.
Right, exactly.
That's a kneecap biter right there, baby.
Seatbelt gang or whatever. Like I think that Jerry Jacobs would love playing with him, and so I was but they listed him at 5'9" on TCU's website. So like, so ASIC says, does any right tackle remotely make that money? Not currently. Like right now, the top of the right tackle market is Ryan Ramczyk at 19, but you got to remember this is probably 2 years away.
Yeah.
So like you're gonna get turnover at the top of that market as the next right tackle resigns, then the next right tackle. So like I'm trying to predict like what the top of that market might look like, 2 years after this free agency cycle. So
not only that, the right tackles and the left tackles are becoming just almost equally as important. It's no longer just the left tackle blind side. Right. I mean, Joey Bosa, Nick Bosa, Hutch, these guys, they don't just stick on one side. They go all over the place, and you need good people on both ends. So those right tackles are becoming just as valuable as the lefts.
Exactly. So like I wouldn't be surprised to see right tackle money start to approach left tackle money. Probably never really equal out, but like it's close. So anyways, this cornerback from TCU, I was like, oh, he would be a perfect like slot corner for the Lions, like maybe at pick 81 or something like that. He measured in at like 5'7", 180.
Oh, jeez.
And I would, because he's at the East West Shrine Bowl, and I was like, I like the way he plays.
Yeah.
But the history of 5'7" corners in the NFL is not a long or distinguished one.
Yeah, that's rough.
So anyway,
I remember when I was 5'7".
Mm-hmm.
8th grade, maybe.
Yeah, right. Before we move on to positional value and do like a nice little recap there, I do want to say one more guy who's at the Senior Bowl right now is Dejuan Jones, and he was the right tackle for Ohio State this last year. He is 6'8", 350, and his wingspan, like if he sticks his arms out like this, is 89 inches. He has the wingspan of a guy, if you stretch a human being out to be proportional, his wingspan is that of a dude who is 7 feet 5 inches tall. So like,
not right.
I saw a rep today on Twitter where he was going against Andre Carter, an edge that I like as a prospect from Army, who is 6'7", like 260, and is just like cut. And like the dude, it's like holding like your little sibling away. Like the dude's arms, like Andre Carter's arms are like flailing like this, trying to get into the chest of Dejuan Jones, and he cannot reach him because Dejuan Jones is literally just like, nope, you're good. You're going to stay right there. I am a gigantic human, and you cannot get past me. And like some team is going to, how dare you, Mark? Some team is going to fall in love with Dejuan Jones, and I'd be really surprised if he's not a late first or early second round pick.
Yeah.
And like I like gigantic humans. I think they're amazing, but like they don't hold up.
Yeah.
Like just the history of guys who are enormous is that of like
Calvin. I mean, he wasn't that. I mean, he's a big dude, and just the knees and that's tough.
Yeah, it is. So should we go to positional value?
Let's do it.
You want to bring up your chart? You work so hard on it.
Well, let's first talk about the concept of how we think of positional value and how the league thinks of it, and then we'll bring up the chart that I worked over lunch on to kind of reinforce like whether we're full of crap or not.
So I am going to share my screen here in a minute. Okay, so if you would like a good read about why our theory, which is not our theory, we are borrowing from Pro Football Focus. If you would like to have a more concise description of why we feel positional value matters, I have an article that you should read. And so I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So this article right here, Why Positional Value Matters in the NFL Draft, it was written by Mike Renner, June 25th, 2020. This article is fantastic. And like what it basically does is it outlines the preconceptions about why certain positions matter more than others in the NFL. And so I also want to say, just for the record, this is not just opinion as to why the positional value idea has come to the forefront of like roster building in the NFL. This is an examination of how teams value positions by the kinds of contracts they hand out to those positions. So like it's entirely possible that punter could have ended up on this list if NFL teams were going out there and giving punters like $15-20 million a year contracts. They're not doing that, of course. Like they're dedicating those resources in different places: quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, edge rusher, and corner. Those are the 5 key positions in the NFL. And why are they important? Because they are either the quarterback or like directly affected by the quarterback. So you have wide receivers who the quarterback throws the ball to. And since passing is now more important in the NFL to be good at than running, wide receivers have usurped that portion of the skill position group. And then tackles, right, are the guys who keep the quarterback safe. So they are massively important. And then you flip that over to the defense. Your edge rushers are the guys who try and get to the quarterback to pressure and disrupt them. And cornerbacks are the players who are guarding the wide receivers who the quarterback is trying to throw the ball to. So that, and the way that the money plays out in the NFL is it basically follows that logic train. Not always, but very, very close. And so when you are trying to build a team that has been bad, like the Lions, into a team that is going to be good, and then good into the long term, investing resources, draft capital, free agency dollars, into these positions is more important than positions like linebacker, running back, fullback, tight end, that kind of thing. So that's the quick summation on why positional value matters in NFL teams. And it's not just the Lions, it's to everybody. Oh, I hope David Pike watches this channel at somebody. David Pike, Mike, is that...
I know who it is.
Yeah.
The joke is who?
Detroit Lions Forum or whatever. I used to go there for chuckles because he would pull some asinine advanced metric off the web and then be like, Jared Goff is great because he ranked 17th at the stat.
Yeah.
And then like Jared Goff,
that's middle of the pack. In fact, it's the bottom half of middle of the pack.
This, if and when the Lions move on from Jared Goff, which at some point he will just be 50 years old and no longer the quarterback of the Detroit Lions, right? So at some point in the future, they are moving on from Jared Goff, right? When that day comes, I will be on David Pike's Twitter, David Pike's Facebook page. I'm going to send a letter to his house or whatever, and basically be like, what do you do now that your whole world is just crashed in and on itself? Like, because he is the ultimate golf apologist and it literally makes me sick. So,
hey, fandom can have you do different things, right?
Listen, I don't have a problem with Jared Goff as a person or as a member of the Detroit Lions. I just don't think the resources that have been allocated to have him on the team are appropriate for what he is bringing to the team.
Yeah. So
that's my problem. That's my only issue with Jared Goff. And if the first time that he misses Jameson Williams next year, I am tweeting at Eric Schlitt from Pride of Detroit and being like, I told you he couldn't do it. I told you that he wasn't going to hit JMO in stride. So
he just has to make sure JMO's so far behind everybody he can underthrow it safely.
Yeah, correct. Right.
So let's do this. Let's add this to the thing. I'm gonna take the banner down.
So let me set this up real quick here. So at lunch today, you were like, hey, I want a research project. And you said, I wonder how the NFL draft over the last 5 years has broken down if you looked at where positions of value have been taken, if you were to break the draft down picks 1 through 10, 11 through 20, basically into thirds, right?
Yeah, essentially. Top 10 and then the next 10 and then the last 12 because there's not 30 teams.
Exactly. So, and this is what you found. So, like, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Yep. So let me zoom over to the left here. So one of the things that we did what I did was I highlighted in green the positions that we believe are positions of not just us, right? Through the stats, through the money, through the draft. These are clearly the positions that matter. And just like that article said. So quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, because it's a passing league, just like Drew said. And on the other side of the ball, it's the edge, it's the defensive tackle that trying to stop the quarterback, and then the cornerback trying to stop the wide receivers, right? So those are the 6 positions, 3 on the front, 3 on the back, that matter the most. So I said, all right, well, I wonder if how the draft plays out. And as I look at it, let me find my mouse here. So as I look at the draft this last year, what I did was I broke down this first column in each year is the number of players at that position in the first round. Number 36, you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, that was the very first off the board outside of that round. So there were none in the first round for running backs this last year. 36 was the earliest running back taken. Tight ends, there wasn't one until pick 55. Last year, the first center off the board was 114. Surprisingly, defensive tackle, there was not one in the first round.
That was Barmore, wasn't it? And then I think that Nwuzurike was next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then safety. So basically, when you start looking at this, you're like, well, position of value isn't a real thing. You take a look at it and you're like, okay, well, in the last 5 years, there were 2 drafts where a center wasn't drafted at all in the first round. There was one in last year, one in 2019, and then 2 back in 2018.
The one in 2019 was Ragnow, wasn't it?
It was. It was. Quarterbacks, this was kind of the anomalous year. There was just not a good class this year. But if you look at it in the past, over the last 5 years, you got 5 in the first round, 3 in the first round, 4 and 5. And then I also broke down, all right, where were they? Were they in the top 10 picks? Were they in the middle of the round, or were they toward the end? And obviously, when you start looking at those positions of value, you look at those quarterbacks, 3 of the 5 were in the top 10. They had 1 tackle in the top 10. This, by the way, was Kyle Pitts, a little bit more pass catchery than tight end, but he was kind of what I would call an anomaly for a tight end. 3 of the 5 wide receivers were in the top 10. The top 10 rounded out in the cornerback. So we start looking at this, like last year, 3 tackles, 2 wide receivers, 3 edge rushers, and 2 cornerbacks. The first non-position of value was 14th, and that was Kyle Hamilton.
Right.
And then it was Kenyon Green, a guard, at 15. When you look at last year, the same kind of thing. The positions of value were the ones that were taken in the first round, the exception being Kyle Pitts. But then you start looking at, well, what's the first non-position of value? Micah Parsons, he was a linebacker. Was he, though?
Not really.
And Elijah Vera Tucker, he was a guard. He's a tackle now.
Yeah,
right?
Not really. Yeah.
Parsons is an edge rusher. So you really start looking at this, and you're like, they didn't actually draft a line, what we would consider an off-ball linebacker. They drafted an edge guy. They drafted somebody that they were planning to move into a tackle position. Even in 2020, when we had the same kind of thing, you got quarterbacks, you've got tackles, you've got your defensive line, you've got 1 linebacker in the top 10 and 2 corners. That linebacker was Isaiah Simmons, and they really moved him into a slot corner. They got a cornerback. The next highest non-position of value was 20th, and that was an outside line. They moved him to an edge rusher. Like, very clearly, these are the positions that matter. You don't find. Look at all the zeros for things like centers, linebackers, and some of these are like, oh, this was like the 28th and 29th pick. They're far back in the draft. So the other thing that I did was I then started, okay, what's the average look like in the first round? There are approximately 3.6, obviously. There are never partial people, but 3.6 quarterbacks taken, 4.4 tackles, 4.2 wide receivers. I don't have to read them off, but the average of the averages was 2.6. So what I did is I highlighted all of them that were at 2.6 or higher in green. And as you can see, the ones that are picked mostly in the first round are positions of value. The only exception is linebacker, which we've seen most of those guys aren't actually playing linebackers. They're actually playing edge rushers.
So let me break in real quickly here, Mike, because I think this is a good spot to mention. Like, the reason that we harp on positional value so much on this show is that based upon these numbers, you see the NFL's trending toward drafting as many of these guys as they can early, largely because this is where you get the biggest savings on a player at these positions. So what do I mean by savings? What I mean is, like, Justin Jefferson is starting contract negotiations with the Minnesota Vikings. One analyst I was reading in The Athletic estimated that he might get $30 million a year, which would be ridiculous. But, like, can you argue with the Vikings for paying it?
Nope.
You know? So, like, I mean, like, the comp that Justin Jefferson has with how he's played since the end of the NFL is Jerry Rice. So, I mean, like, that's insane. So, but if you draft a Justin Jefferson, you're getting him for like $5-6 million a year, and you're getting him at his youngest when he's likely to be at least entering into his prime when he gets a second contract. So, like, if I had to go out into free agency and find a wide receiver that's going to perform like Justin Jefferson, I have to pay $20 million a year. But if I draft one who I think could be Justin Jefferson, and I'm right, then I'm paying $5. And so then I have the difference between those two things. I have $15 million that I can go and spend on the rest of the roster.
And then you don't get stuck with things like one thing I will note is if we look at this, we did have a couple running backs way back in 18 that were actually taken. That was one, Saquon Barkley was taken 2 overall. And the problem with that, especially as the game has changed over the last couple of years, is he's on his rookie deal and he is already the 9th highest paid running back.
Yeah. 3 years later.
3 years later, he is the 9th highest paid running back, as guys like McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, they've kind of reset Derrick Henry. They've kind of reset the market, and he's still the 9th highest paid.
I cannot believe that the Saints gave Kamara that much money. It's just unbelievable.
And taking a running back that early automatically catapults you into this guy's in the top 10 of his position before he takes a snap and before he actually puts anything on the field. Right. And you just can't do that.
You're paying him effectively a second contract immediately.
Yeah.
Like James Conner, when he went from Pittsburgh to Arizona, signed for like $7 million a year. Okay, that's what Barkley's making, basically. Like, you don't need, and like, I would rather have Saquon Barkley on my team than James Conner, but I mean, like, James Conner is a perfectly fine, serviceable running back for the NFL. And like, you're not getting any savings whatsoever when you draft Saquon Barkley at 2. Like, it's a misappropriation of not only draft capital, but also money.
Yeah, and if you look at the average for the entire running back room on a team, it's 5% of their cap. The average team spends 5% on all of their running backs combined. And what you see here, the top 8 are all spending more than that on one person.
Right.
And what that does is that hampers the ability to put money in other positions.
And it also, like, one thing that I've really learned about the roster construction this year from the Lions, paying this amount of attention to their roster moves, is that, like, PFF had them rated the number 1 special teams unit in the NFL this season, and like their roster, their special teams unit is chock full of like running backs and wide receivers and linebackers and those guys who are back of the roster guys who cost $1 million or $2 million a year, and like Justin Jackson was a good special teamer for the Lions this year, and like, he's making $1 million, and so every $1 million that you spend on a running back over over the average or above expectation, you are losing something somewhere. And if that's a good special teamer, like, all 3 phases matter. Like, the Lions have good special teams this year, and they can get better on special teams. Like if maybe they sign a different kicker who has better range or whatever. But like it's hard to make those moves to improve in little tiny different ways if you're dedicating above average money to a low position of value.
Yep.
So
yeah, when you hear people say position of value is not a real thing and it doesn't matter, nobody in the NFL believes that.
Yeah.
Right.
The people
I
in
can
the
tell
league,
that because they're drafting in the top 10. They're in the first round, the positions that matter. They're paying the people high contracts for those positions that matter. Like you're just not getting those kind of contracts. You're not getting those draft picks. They're not using. Every team has the same amount of capital, right? Everybody has the same number of draft picks every year. Now, granted, you can trade them or whatnot, but everybody's given the same amount. Everybody has the same salary cap. What you do with it shows the priorities that you have. So when you are using your draft capital on quarterback, tackle, wide receiver, edge, defensive tackle, and cornerback, you are saying those are more important. Those matter. Right. And when you dish out the big contracts, you're saying that matters. So if they say that, they're wrong, like objectively wrong, not even subjectively. They're objectively wrong. Positions do have more value than other positions.
Exactly. And so the big question leading into the draft last year for the Lions was, what do you do at 2, right? Like for most of the offseason, Aiden Hutchinson was occupying that, more than likely to be taken at 1 spot, right? So when it was discussed, like what should the Lions do at 2, he wasn't there. He wasn't being calculated as being available. So Kyle Hamilton, Kayvon Thibodeau, even Trayvon Walker got into the conversation late. Like, what do you do if you're the Lions? And there was a lot of Kyle Hamilton supporters. I like Kyle Hamilton. He's fine. He plays for the Ravens. That's my second team. Like, he's done well. He had a good season, but he was a safety at Notre Dame. And, like, he played all over the field. He played linebacker. He played in the slot. But he was primarily a safety. And, like, the people that wanted Kyle Hamilton wanted him to occupy a position that basically let him play center field. And he fell to the Ravens. They took the value. But through the first 8 games, it wasn't going very well for him. And so what they did was, once they made the Roquan Smith trade, like they moved Kyle from a safety down to the slot, and then they moved Patrick Queen, their other off-ball linebacker, to a different role, and then gave Queen's spot to Smith. And then all those guys kind of came together to be that middle section of the defense, and that worked, right?
Yeah.
But then the Ravens the Ravens still used a first-round pick on a safety. They used a first-round pick on a center, and then they traded a second and a fifth for an off-ball linebacker, and then extended that off-ball linebacker for 5 years, $20 million a year. Yeah. That's even though those are good players, and even though they are working well together, that's a misappropriation of capital.
And even that safety pick wasn't a top 10. It was 14. And he was almost a consensus most physically gifted athlete in the draft.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter when you play a position that is not one of the 6 that we've highlighted.
And you can say the same thing about Isaiah Simmons when he came out a couple years earlier. That was the Jeff Okudah class, right?
Yes. Yep.
So, I mean, like, and I was in love with, like, oh, he's a safety. Oh, he's a linebacker. Look at all the different things you can do with him if you have a smart coordinator. And you can. But the problem that teams have with these hybrid guys is it's like, where are we going to play you to get the most out of you? And the answer is becoming slot cornerback.
Right.
Because you're kind of a linebacker. You're fast enough to stick with tight ends. You're bigger than running backs coming out of the backfield. That's where we want you to match up. And like the guy this year, there's 2 guys this year that are listed as different things that could both end up playing that slot corner position. One is Brian Branch, who I would love to be a Detroit Lion. If Brian Branch somehow became a Detroit Lion, awesome. That dude's awesome.
Yeah.
And the other guy is Trenton Simpson, linebacker from Clemson. He's kind of a slot corner as well. So, I mean, like, whomever is going to take those two guys, I'm betting they end up playing in the same role in the NFL, which is slot corner.
Yeah. Well, and then when you look at Kyle Hamilton, when you draft him, his contract is going to end up just outside of the top 10. And that's before you have to go into a second contract, right? Like, I mean, you better hit on a Hall of Famer if you're going to be taking someone right there. And I mean, maybe he will be, but oof.
You know, like if you draft Quentin Nelson, the dude's going to be a Hall of Famer. Sorry. You know, like that pick worked out.
Yeah.
You can take a guard at 6 if he's going to be a Hall of Famer. The problem is you have no idea. It's all speculation on every draft pick. And like what one pride has said right here, like Kirby's been better, is that what Kirby Joseph does is different than Kyle Hamilton. So that's the first thing that needs to be said. Kirby actually plays that center fielder who's, you're not going to get past me. I'm the ball hawking free safety. He was responsible for like six or 7 turnovers, this season. So like awesome.
Yeah, 3 of which just for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Which we hate.
4.
We hate Aaron Rodgers.
I know.
So, but you also got Kirby Joseph at 97. That's 83 picks later. You're not paying them anything close to what each other are worth, or what Kyle Hamilton's making as the 14th pick. So it's absolutely. So when I talk about how Brad Holmes is drafting appropriately, that's what I'm talking about. Brad Holmes is able to go out into the draft and say, I don't need to take a wide receiver in the second round because he ends up finding Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th. I don't need to trade up from 32 like Jacksonville did to take Devin Lloyd, or what the Packers did when they took Quay Walker in the first round of this last class. He found a dude in the 6th round. And you've shown that at least in their rookie seasons, Malcolm Rodriguez played better than those guys.
Yeah.
So like there will be no Luke G discussion in the chat. Hush.
Speaking of Rodrigo and comparisons.
Yeah. So like the thing that Brad Holmes does as well as, if not better than every other GM in the league, is that through 2 classes, he is finding talent that is outplaying its draft selection. And like the examples there are numerous. We don't have to go through all of them.
Yeah.
And like, he's not going to hit on every prospect, and he has not hit on every prospect. But you take those chances because if they end up like performing like a first round pick like Amon-Ra St. Brown has, or like arguably a first or second round pick like Rodrigo has, you're turning a 6th round pick into what most other teams are using premium draft capital to accomplish. And that's what's accelerating this rebuild, is because, and like when people talk about like, well, he always, our 2nd round picks never work out, or he drafts injured players. Yeah, that's the other side of this coin. Because if you hit on Levi Onwuzurike, if you hit on Ife Melifonwu, and they end up being quality starters, the reason you were able to get them in the 2nd or 3rd round is because they had an injury that dropped their draft capital, the perception of them. Yeah, so like he didn't hit on all those players. There's no reason you should expect him to. But like the guys that he has hit on have outperformed, and it could have just as easily been Onwuzurike than St. Brown. It could have easily have been Melifonwu and not Kirby Joseph, or not Malcolm Rodriguez.
Yeah.
So like when we say trust in Brad Holmes, it's because this is where he's really finding the value for like this draft class. And like, this is why the team is performing as well as it has. It's because like they had snaps. Rookies can come in and they can eat up some of those starter snaps and prove that they belong. And he found guys that actually do in appropriate spots. I mean, we're paying Malcolm Rodriguez nothing for 4 years. I mean, we're paying him nothing.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I mean, think about this for a second. You let Malcolm Rodriguez play on this team for 4 years, and then you let him walk in free agency. What are you missing out on? a 6th round pick. Now, we probably don't want him to leave, right? But
Not
like,
as good as he's been playing.
right, exactly. But like, you at some point are just like, hey, if you hit on a 6th round pick, I mean, there's people out there that are saying like, hey, Lamar Jackson, the Ravens should just let him enter free agency because they got like the first 5 years of his career at the number 32 overall pick and paid him almost nothing for it. And then like, what are you really losing?
Yeah.
You know, because it like eventually like his contract might be a detriment. His contract extension might be a detriment to their ability to continue to build the roster around him.
Yeah, they may just end up tagging him. The franchise tag is only $32 million, I think, for quarterbacks.
Yeah. So
whether he plays on it, that's the other question, right?
The league came out and listed their, I'm so sorry that I'm not being as coherent as I wanted to be here, but like listed their what the tags are going to be worth in the future. And I can't seem to bring it up from my Discord, but quarterbacks is going to be $32 million, right? And so that's less than what you were probably going to pay Lamar Jackson on an extension, and it gives the team control. So he's going to get tagged. And that was completely expected. But I completely will expect him to not sign it and demand to be traded until they give him the contract that he wants. And it sounds like he wanted what Deshaun Watson got. And what they offered was effectively the same thing, but $100 million less in guaranteed money. So
yeah,
if you're $100 million apart on a contract negotiation, they're going to have to pay it. I mean, like, there's no reason for him to cave or acquiesce.
Yeah.
This is going to be like the windfall of his career contract. He shouldn't move off of his demand.
Yeah.
So,
I think we've hit on everything.
I'm pretty sure we did.
We've had a good group in the chat. A lot of activity. That was awesome. Some names I hadn't seen before. Kurt Romero. So
we are up to 57 subs, Michael. We 57. Got 2 subs.
We need to have 100 sub goal.
Yeah.
And see what we want to do for 100 subs. I don't know what we want to do.
Yeah, I think that's probably. So 50 subs, I bought a hat, right? So like, is there anything that you guys, I mean, I don't know how many people are still quote unquote in chat, but like if we hit 100 subs, what could we do that you guys would want to see? I have no idea. Like,
yep.
we're some things that we're talking about doing is coming up with a 2023 NFL draft viewer guide. So the podcast is supposed to be for people who are aware of football but don't really know like the ins and outs, like someone who's maybe more of a not an average fan. And so we want to give them talking points like, oh, you know, so if they're sitting at a bar having lunch or whatever, and some guy's like, man, Goff sure is great. I can't believe these are the 10th best quarterback in the NFL. You could be like, well, you know, traditionally he hasn't been ranked much higher than 20th, you know, so it's like it's about more than just your whatever. Donate $10 to your animal shelter. Interesting.
You know, I basically did that over the weekend.
Oh God.
We usually donate. We go to like Sam or Costco and buy a couple big bags of dog food and some dog treats and blankets and towels because we get rescue pups, and we went and did that. And I'm like, we're not getting another dog, and so we dropped stuff off. Saw this adorable little dog. Came back home. Like, nope, we're not doing it. Spent 45 minutes telling my son, 0% chance we're getting another dog. There's no circumstances in which we'll get another dog. Don't even. And then as soon as he walks out the door to go to work, I looked at my wife and I'm like, you know, that was a really cute dog though. So 15 minutes later, we were on the car and back, and then we ended up with Rosie. She was my work buddy yesterday. She climbed right up on the desk here. So I'm perfectly good with donating to an animal shelter as well as rescuing dogs from animal shelters.
I will not be getting a dog.
No.
So don't even think about trying to get me a pet. So
all right. But maybe a donation or something, and maybe we'll pick some sort of charity. I like the animal shelter idea because we do that stuff all the time.
So
all
right. Well, we'll keep talking about it. If you have any thoughts or suggestions or questions you'd like to have answered, please email us at casualgmpodcast@gmail.com and the same address on Twitter.
Right on. And if you have any other ideas, dude, you need to get a dog.
If Mark would like to supplement my income with the exact amount a dog costs to have, I'll get one. Right Until then, it's a solid no.
It's a solid no. All right, we'll see you guys next Tuesday, 7 p.m. We're going to do our quarterback special next week.
It's going to be a deep dive next week.
It will be a deep dive. I've gotten a lot of stats, and you guys are going to be like, either that's not true or I totally knew it.
Consider it. Okay, dude. If you consider it, if you say, yeah, I'm going to go do it, we'll talk numbers. Okay.
All right. We'll see you guys next Tuesday.
See you guys.
Peace.